Yesterday I was counting the calves and I realized that I've actually miscounted. I actually do have 35 cattle. For whatever reason, I miscounted and I must have just, but I do have 35 cattle. And so that effectively means the whole thing with the balance sheet. That effectively means that if I sell 5 cattle every month, it'll take me about 7 months to sell all my cattle, okay? And I was thinking about this earlier today. And the big idea right now is to sell my cattle at 800 pounds, okay? And either which way, however which way I do it, if I sell my cattle at 800 pounds and I reinvest the capital and I sell 5 and I buy 10, and then the extra 5 animals make me more money on a monthly basis, or if I hold on to my animals until 900 pounds, and I've been discussing this whole idea. Either which way, my balance sheet is going to go under 80% leverage by about next month. My balance sheet will go under 80% leverage next month. And I was talking about this whole thing, with the debt that I paid off. That effectively puts my my herd count at 35. That puts my baseline at 35, and I'm at 35 right now. And so, if I just take the money. If I sell 5 animals next month, I have 35 animals, and that would effectively mean I would have to sell 5 animals a month for 7 months straight to sell all my animals. And if I sell 5 animals at 800 pounds next month, I take that money and I reinvest the money. I sell the 5 and I buy 10. If I do that, the appreciation of the 10 animals will effectively put my put my balance sheet at about 80% leverage starting by next month. I would anticipate that my balance sheet is at 80% or so leverage at next month. That's what I reasonably anticipate. If I sell these animals at 900, if instead of selling the animals at 800, if I wait one more month, then the value of the animals will effectively go up by about $150-$200 per animal, right? And so that would also put me at about 80% leverage. So no matter what, under any circumstance, I will be at about 80% leverage next month. And you got to remember, this whole thing is very dynamic. If I increase the size of my herd, I actually give myself a raise for about $1,000 a month for every 5 animals that I increase the size of my herd by. And if I increase the size of my herd by 5 animals by putting my money back into the deal, then the equity of the animals also belongs to me, okay? Those 5 animals are producing me an extra $5, or excuse me, they're producing me an extra. Those 5 animals would be producing me about an extra $1,000 a month. The equity of the animals also belongs to me, right? The total equity of the animal belongs to me. And if I have 5 animals worth of money and I invest that money, and then I go to the bank and I take a loan for another 5 animals worth of money and I invest that money, the 5 animals that I bought by leveraging from the bank, the 5 animals that I bought by taking a loan from the bank by leveraging against my assets, those 5 animals, the equity of the animal technically belongs to the bank, but the $1,000 a month that I would make on that money would belong to me. And this payment, it's a recurring payment, right? It is not a one-time payment. It's not like I increased my income by $1,000 for the month and only this month, right? The animals will effectively continue, granted that I do my part and the animals do okay. And all of the cattle, I guess they've suddenly decided that they want to run over here to my truck. Dang, I had a really nice spot under this tree. I hope they don't start rubbing their head on my truck. But granted that I do my part and the animals are gaining properly and the animals are healthy and alive and doing well, they'll put on about 200 pounds a month apiece, okay? Or not 200 pounds, they'll put on about $200 a month, all right? So each animal will go up in value by about $200 a month. So if I have 5 more animals, I've effectively given myself a raise for $1,000 a month. If I increase the size of my herd by 10 animals, I've increased my my payment, my net earnings by $2,000 a month. The cattle are absolutely swarming my truck. They're all over my truck right now. Uh-oh, and they're rubbing their heads on my truck. Let me see if I can scare them off a little bit. Yeah, I don't want them messing with my truck. I don't want them damaging my truck. Ooh. And let me see if I can scare them off a little bit. And so yep, that's a way to think about it. If I go and I take my money, if I sell my 5 animals and I buy 10 animals, the equity of the animal belongs to me. And I make about $200. So the equity of the animal would effectively be, if I buy them at whatever, at $1,250, that $1,250 would belong to me. If I legitimately wanted my $1,250 back, if I legitimately, let's say I go and I buy an animal for $1,250. And I bought a commodity type animal at a commodity price. I bought him at about 225 pounds. So and the feeder cattle market is sitting at 350. And so let's say that I and the whole thing about the buying the animals is like, if I understand that I am taking a look at a number 1 type animal, like if I'm at the sale barn and I take a look at an animal and I directly understand that I am looking at a number 1 type, medium, large frame, commodity type animal, steer, right? Then I would be willing to pay a little bit more. Okay. Sometimes you go to these sales and they will group number 1 type animals together. All right. And, if I understand that I'm looking at number 1 type animal, then I would be paying effectively the commodity price. I would not take the 10% deduction. Okay. And so, I'd effectively be paying whatever, 10% more. So instead of $1,250, I'd be paying about $1,400. But, the whole thing, with the, so the $1,250, let's say I buy an animal for $1,250 and I've purchased this animal, a commodity type animal, at the commodity price. That $1,250, if I legitimately want that money back, I can sell the animal. All right. And I would effectively more or less get my money back. Okay. But let's say now that I am, instead of investing my own money, I go to the bank and I take a loan for $1,250 and I buy an animal with that $1,250. That $1,250, if I sold the animal, I would effectively have to pay the bank back, right? That would be how I would pay the bank back, right? But I could pay the bank back, right? If I legitimately needed the money, I could sell the animal and pay the bank back, right? But all of the money that I made on top of that $1,250 minus interest or whatever would belong to me. That would be my money, right? And so, and this whole thing about, this is actually a good time to take a look at it. The whole idea of, me, I effectively make money 24/7. All right, I make money 24/7, and this is the big idea of making money. You really want to be in a situation where your money is making you money, okay? This is the big idea. This is the big, the whole thing. And the whole thing about money, I've talked about money and I've talked about it all the time. All right. And I talk about this, effectively all the time, the big idea of capitalism. And if you legitimately, the whole thing about America is that, America is the greatest economic system, okay, known to mankind. Let's just be honest about it, okay? Capitalism is a wonderful thing if you actually take a look at it through an objective lens. All right. More people in America have a better quality of life. And here's another way of looking at it. 50 years ago, let's say that you were born 50 years ago, right? No amount of money in the world would have bought you an iPhone. All right. No amount of money in the world would have bought you a car like the car that you drive today. All right, I can almost guarantee that you're not driving some 1970s type vehicle. All right, no amount of money in the world would have bought you a car that you can drive today in the 1970s if you were born 50 years ago. All right, my father is about to be 70, and so he was born in the 1950s. My mother is 63 years old. And my mother was born effectively in the 50s as well. And they tell me that in the 50s, when a baby was born, you didn't even celebrate the birth of the baby. You celebrated its 100th day alive, because so many babies would die that why would you celebrate the birth of a baby if the chance of that baby dying is so high, right? Like that baby, the chance of that baby dying is just very high. So why would you celebrate the birth of that baby, right? That's effectively what was happening in the 1950s. And I've spoken about this. There is a very real possibility that over the next 50 years, we are going to see more massive improvements. All right. This is the whole thing about money, right? The whole thing about capitalism. And it may not be a perfect system, but don't be a little tart about it. All right, don't be a little whatever, go and be a part of something that's actually going to make the world a better place. All right, don't sit there and have your panties in a wad and throw a fit. Oh my God, do you have some moronic ideal type thing? Nobody cares. All right, we have to take a look at it for what it is. More people today have a better quality of life because of the American system. More people today have a better quality of life than ever has been achieved in the history of humanity. And from what I see in the world, we are headed for incredible things. We are set to do incredible things. Wonderful things. All right? And if you're not going to be a part of it, then go and, keep your BS to yourself. I hope you turn yourself around. Don't live your life as a net negative. All right? You don't want to be in a situation where you're a net negative. All right? More people now have a better quality of life than ever before in the history of humanity. All right? That's the situation that we're in if we take a look at it through an objective lens. It may not be a perfect system, but it is doing incredible things. And in all honesty, how are you going to create a perfect system? There is no perfect system. All right, the average person is not a saint. All right, when it comes down to it, the average person is not a saint. There's a very realistic possibility that if you give somebody, if you give somebody $1,000, and I've already even said this. The whole thing about it is, in all honesty, when you take a look at the world for what it is, granted that you're not making $0 a year, granted that you're making at least $30,000 a year, if you manage to make an extra $2,000 a month, that's effectively about how much money you need to legitimately move yourself up in the world. That's about what it takes. Almost everything on the planet can be purchased once you start making $8,000 a month. Almost everything, effectively 99% of anything. Granted that you're not an idiot. If you invest $2,000 and you live on $6,000, if that's what you do, if you bring home $8,000 a month and you invest $2,000 of it and you live on $6,000, you can still live a very comfortable life on that $6,000. And if your $2,000 a month is making you a 7% return a year, if you compound that out to even 7 years, your $2,000 a month, your $24,000 a year investment for 7 years would be a total capital of $180,000, but that $180,000 would be worth $250,000. And if you have $250,000 and it's making you 7%, then that's effectively you gave yourself a raise for $15,000-$16,000 a year. All right, so now you're not making $18,000. Now you're making effectively about $10,000. All right, and so that's the whole thing. Money doesn't do anything. Okay, this is something I put a lot of emphasis on. Money does not do anything. All right, and if you're gonna be a net negative, keep it to yourself, or throw yourself into a hole, or turn your life around. Okay. Don't go into whatever. Let's just be straightforward, honest about it. All right. The American system has created more opportunity and a better quality of life for more people than ever has been achieved before, ever. All right, ever in the history of humanity. And from what I see, we are set to do it again. All right, we are set to do incredible things. I legitimately believe that humanity is on the cusp of doing incredible things. incredible things, wonderful things. All right, and if you're not going to be a part of it, then go and throw yourself into a hole, turn yourself around, or keep it to yourself. All right. You know, humanity is headed for incredible things, incredible, wonderful things. All right. And the whole thing, about making money with money, a very realistic way of looking at this, is the whole idea of making money with money. I believe this is a kind of an interesting idea. If you make enough money, because everybody has different spending habits, right? And I've always said that if you have $10 million, if you have $100 million, if you have $1 billion, then your spending habits will be different than somebody. Well, I mean, the amount of money, whatever, it's different, right? And it's like, if you did something that was, the morally okay, and I've already discussed the idea about money. Technically, there is an infinite amount of money. All right. This whole idea that, but we cannot give everybody $1 million, because if we gave everybody $1 million, if everybody had $1 million, $1 million wouldn't be worth anything. The money would not be worth anything. People would be burning it to keep warm. All right. If we gave everybody money, money would not be worth anything, right? This is what I talk about, the whole idea of the pie. We have to give everybody an equal opportunity at the pie, but we cannot give everybody the pie. All right. We cannot give everybody a piece of pie, because if we gave everybody a piece of pie, there's a very realistic possibility that if we were just handing out pie, that people would eat the pie and not do anything else. They would just sit there and wait for the pie. All right. That there's that happens, that there's a very realistic possibility that happens. All right. But we need to give everybody an opportunity at the pie. Right. And this is where I talk about things like money talks. Money's not an opinion. If you don't have any money and you have a bunch of opinions, are you not even ashamed of yourself? Right? Like, why do you like, oh my God, well, I fell out of heaven a 7. My life is a magical journey. You got all of these opinions, but you have no money. Money's not an opinion. All right. And a very realistic gauge to determine whether or not you're doing well financially. This is an interesting idea. Do you make enough money when you're sleeping to cover all of your expenses for the day? That's a very realistic way of looking at this. And there's actually a dog running around the dog actually just got out here and is running around on the field, but I'm gonna have to keep an eye on this dog. I'm gonna see what this dog does. Y'all see him over there? But he's got a collar, and so I'm not too concerned about it. But if the dog starts chasing around my cattle, I'm gonna have to do something about that, because but there's a dog out there, but it's got a collar, so it's not some kind of a feral animal, I don't think. Oh, and the cattle are chasing him away, so that's good. Yeah, the cattle are chasing him away. That's good. I want the cattle to do that. If the cattle can fend for themselves and they all charge at him like this, so the dog will probably run away. And so, but a very realistic gauge to determine whether or not you're doing well with money, is, do you make enough money to cover all of your expenses for the day when you're sleeping? That's a very honest way of looking at it. If you do not make enough money, and I can actually see the dog running off in the distance over there, and the cattle are grouped up and staring at him. So he's running off in the distance over that way. Yeah, he's running off. He not coming back. He headed for the gate. Okay, so that's good. But that's a very realistic way of looking at it. Do you make enough money to cover all of your expenses for the day while you were sleeping? If that is yes, then you're doing well with money. I make enough money when I'm sleeping to cover all of my expenses for the day. And the reason that I say that is because I think that, just by default, if you make enough money when you're sleeping to cover all of your expenses for the day, you can now spend your entire day thinking about, being more productive. You don't have to worry about being productive. A lot of people wake up and they think about having to be productive. Oh my God, well, I need to get myself ready to go to work, and then I need to, go and, whatever, do, whatever, right? I need to go and, I think people wake up and they think about just being productive in general. While they were sleeping, they were not accomplishing anything. But the big idea with money is you really want to make money with money. The whole idea about working for money, it's not a good idea. All right? Working for money is not a good idea. It won't make you a lot of money. If you work extra hours for a set period, and there are, and there are people who went out and worked, their entire life. And, I work my entire life, but I'm not concerned about it. I mean, the thing about it is, like, if I wasn't working, what would I be doing? Right? And, what would I be doing if I wasn't working? All right. I actually, working, I wouldn't say, working gives me peace of mind is what it gives me. I don't enjoy it. I don't hate it. I don't enjoy it. I don't feel any emotion about it. Working gives me a peace of mind. Working gives me peace of mind. Okay. I get up and I get after it. And then, when I'm done, I go home and I go to sleep. All right. And it gives me something to do. It gives me a peace of mind. That's what I would say work does for me. It's like a zen. All right. I don't enjoy it. I don't hate it. I don't feel any kind of emotion about it. It just gives me peace of mind. But I would say that is a very realistic goal to be looking to achieve, is to make enough money to cover all of your expenses while you're sleeping. If you need $5,000 a month for all of your expenses, then divide that by 30, right? You will need to make about $150 in your sleep. You will need to make about $175 while you were sleeping to cover all of your expenses. Right? That's what I believe is a very reasonable benchmark for financials. And it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how little money you have. That's something that I believe that everybody, could work towards, and have it be on a relative scale for the individual. Because at the end of the day, everybody does not, everybody's spending habits are different. Everybody's spending habits are different. My spending habits are different than everybody else's. And, and money, after a certain point, it doesn't do anything. Okay. I can almost guarantee it. Like, Warren Buffett is not sitting there going, oh my God, if I just had 10 billion more dollars, if I just had 100 million more, I guarantee it. He's not doing that. Okay. Money doesn't do anything after a certain point. And as long as, your spending is within a relative, and, deep down, and I've always said that a lot of people are effectively idiots. A majority, almost everybody's an idiot. I don't know why this happens to so many people, but effectively everybody is an idiot. I'm serious. This is not funny. People will sell their soul for $5,000. People will, oh my God, come up with 10 different reasons why they can't be successful and not have a single reason why they can be successful. Oh my God, well, I fell out of heaven to 7 and my life's a magical journey. You got a bunch of opinions and nothing to show for it, and all these problems. All right, and you don't have a single reason why you're looking to be successful, but you have 10 reasons for why you cannot be successful, why you're unsuccessful, right? Then what do you think is going to happen with your life? All right, you're not going to make it anywhere. Have fun dying poor. I will watch you die poor doesn't mean anything to me. You got to understand, I legitimately make enough money to where money, nobody is paying me to do anything. If you're going to be a moron tard, keep it to yourself. All right. If I legitimately think that I'm doing business with an idiot, I will leave you for dead. I'm serious. I make more money by myself as a cattleman than anybody on the planet makes doing anything. I net myself. And here's the thing. Ask yourself this. How many people do you know? Let's just take a look at my financials right now. I reasonably believe that I will double my numbers within the next 3 months. All right. And the whole thing about, but let's take a look at my financials right now, and then I'll go more into that here in a second. Let's take a look at my financials right now. How many people do you know that net themselves $20,000 a month? They have $20,000 a month left over. Their wealth accumulation is going up by $20,000 a month. How many people do you know that have done that? How many people do you know that are doing that right now? Legitimately, write them down all on a piece of paper. How many people do you know that are netting themselves $20,000 a month? And then ask yourself, how many people do you know that are netting themselves $40,000 a month? Legitimately. I don't know anybody else other than me. Except for like YouTube, like Warren Buffett, okay? Like I understand that there are other people out there in the world, and these people are interesting, and I get to watch their videos, and it's interesting to me. All right, there are people out there, but in terms of my personal life, like me, when I walk out into the world, I don't know anybody else other than me that legitimately net themselves $20,000 a month. And very realistically, it will be about $40,000 a month within 3 months. It may even be $50,000 or $60,000. I have to redo my loans. All right, I may legitimately end up in a situation where I net myself about $50,000 or $60,000 a month within 3 months. Right now, I'm netting myself about $20,000 a month, and I'm reinvesting that money back into my business. Realistically, starting by about next month, I would reasonably have to start leveraging against my earnings. All right, and very, very, very soon, I will probably end up with a fourth pool of money that I cannot invest. Even if I, it's going to become very difficult for me to invest that money. And the whole thing about pool number 4 is that if I have money, let's say that I have a herd of cattle, right? And this herd of cattle is worth 200 grand. And out of that $200,000, I have a loan for $50,000, and I have $150,000 worth of my own money in the herd, right? Or let's just say I have $150,000 worth of cattle, and $100,000 worth of the cattle belong to me, and $50,000 worth of the cattle belong to the bank, the equity of the animals. So that would mean that I have a 30% leverage. And let's say that I'm sitting there, and with this $150,000 worth of cattle, I went and I purchased, let's say that with this $150,000, I purchased, let's say that I have 100 animals. So if I have 100 animals and I divide that by 7, I would be liquidating, more or less about 14 animals a month, right? 15 animals a month, right? And if I'm liquidating 14 animals a month at 800 pounds, that's, once every 7 months, that 14 animals would effectively produce me, those 14 animals, when I sold them, would produce me about 50 grand, 45 grand. So let's say now I have $45,000 sitting in pool number 4, and I have a 30% leverage on my herd. Let's say that I now have a 35% leverage on my herd because I sold I sold my biggest animals. But even then, it's like if I'm selling them 800, if I sell them at 900, then I would effectively recuperate. So let's just say that I would recuperate the loss. And so let's say that the amount of leverage that I have on my herd has stayed the same. Or, let's say that the amount of leverage on my herd has stayed the same. So I'm still sitting there with 33% leverage on my herd. If I dumped the money in pool number 4 back into pool number 1, that would increase the size of my herd by about 15 animals, okay? That would increase the size of my herd by 15 animals. Those 15 animals would be making another $3,000 a month for me. And that $3,000 a month, that's my money. And the 15 animals that I put in the herd, or the 30 animals that I bought with the 15 animals that I sold, that the equity would be my money as well, right? And so I increased my income by $3,000 a month. I went to the bank and I took a loan for another 15 animals, and I dumped that money back into pool number 1 as well. So now I'm sitting there with 33% leverage, right? 33% leverage, but I've increased my monthly net take-home pay by $6,000 a month, right? So instead of doing that, I take a loan for 45. Let's say I have $45,000 sitting in. Let's say I have $45,000 sitting in sitting in pool number 4, and instead of dumping the money in pool number 4 into pool number 1, I went to the bank and I took a loan for another 50 grand. So I took a loan for another 50 grand. So now the total leverage on my herd would be $100,000, and my total equity in the herd would be $150,000. So now I'm at 66% leverage, and I still have $45,000 sitting in pool number 4. And then I can effectively just, that's effectively the situation that I'm headed for. All right. If I will dump my money into pool number 1, but when it gets to a point where it's like, I have like 35% leverage on my balance sheet, and I still have money in pool number 4, then I might as well just invest with debt and just hold on to the money that's in pool number 4. All right. And realistically, like, in this situation, I would very reasonably anticipate that I end up with about 100 animals, right? 100 animals, and they would be worth about 150 grand. And, I would realistically anticipate that I end up in this situation within 3 months. All right, within 3 months. And, and that's effectively what I'm headed for. And if I have $50,000 sitting in pool number 4, and I reasonably anticipate that I can even grow my business is still growing. My balance sheet is under 80% leverage. If I took a look at it and I said, well, I can reasonably double my net take home within 10 months, within the year, I can double my net take home again. Right, then, then the 50 grand, it's not going to do anything. All right. I might as well just go and spend it. And if I leverage $50,000, because the whole thing about, like, let's say I go and I buy myself a Lamborghini, which I won't do. But I'm just using a Lamborghini as an example. Let's say I go and I buy myself a Lamborghini. Let's say that I leverage my $50,000, and I go to the bank and I say, give me a loan against my, give me a loan against my assets. Give me a loan against my land or whatever it may be, and give me a loan against my income or whatever it may be, or I go to the Lamborghini dealership and I tell them, hey, give me a loan for this Lamborghini. You can, here's a proof of funds or whatever. I have land, I have cattle, I have money in the bank, I have a good credit score. I go to the Lamborghini dealership and I say, hey, give me a loan for this Lamborghini. And let's say they give me a 20-year loan. Let's say I qualify myself for for whatever. And I talk to the dealership and they give me a 20-year loan on this thing. And I buy myself a $250,000 Lamborghini. And they give it to me at whatever. Every time that I buy a vehicle, I effectively, anytime that I buy anything, any kind of vehicle, machinery, I get 0% interest, okay? I have very good credit. My money is in outstanding, my money is in outstanding order. I do very well for myself financially. I have very good credit. I get 0% on everything. The most interest that I've ever paid on a vehicle was 3%, okay? And so let's say that I go to the Lamborghini dealership and they give me this loan, right? And realistically, the next year I decide, I don't want this Lamborghini anymore. So I take it back to the dealership, and I just take the loss of equity, right? And that loss of equity is is 50 grand. And that 50 grand, I just, I either, pay for it cash, or I take a loan against my assets, and I, take a loan against my property, and I just pay it off, and I get a 30-year term on 6% interest, right? And I say, I'll pay it back, that 50 grand on a 30-year term for 6% interest would be pennies. All right. It would be like, I don't even know. It would be a couple $100 a month. It doesn't matter to me. And realistically, by the next year, I would probably have doubled my income. But that's the thing, money after a certain point, it's whatever. I can effectively already buy anything. All right. The only reason that I would pay cash for anything is if I was going to get a very good deal on it. That's the only time I would pay cash. And other than that, I would use debt. All right. Because why would I pay cash if I get 0% interest? All right. Why would I pay cash if I got 0% interest, unless they were going to give me a substantial discount, like 25%, If they give me a 25% discount for what I'm buying, then sure, I will pay cash. But even if I don't pay cash, I'm going to get 0% interest anyway. Right? So why wouldn't I just pay with the loan? I just take a loan. I'm not concerned about it. I don't lose sleep over it. If you're losing sleep over something that you bought, then you should probably, take it back and not buy it again. All right? You don't want to be in a situation where you're losing sleep over money. All right? You don't want to be in a situation where, what I call kicking yourself in the dick. You don't want to be kicking yourself in the dick if you're losing sleep over money. And when it comes down to it, don't kill yourself over money. Don't go and kill your family because of money. Oh, it's just money, okay? Money, it's just money. Don't go and kill yourself over money. Don't lose sleep over money. Money, the whole, it's just whatever. Once you understand it, it just becomes whatever. All right. Once you stop kicking yourself in the dick, money becomes whatever. All right. And the whole thing about, there was a topic that I said I was gonna, go into here in a minute, and I completely forgot what it was. But but if I was gonna buy anything, and if I could get it on 0% interest, why wouldn't I just take the 0% interest? I effectively get 0% interest on everything. Why wouldn't I just take the 0% interest, right? The only reason I would pay cash is if I was gonna get a substantial discount. That's the only reason. But that's the thing about me and the whole thing about money is go out into the world right now, and I'm not talking about social media. I've always said that a majority of people are idiots, including people on social media. If you're watching somebody on social media and they look like they have some spectacular, wonderful life, there's a 99.99999% chance that they're a complete idiot tard. And you're sitting there with some, and you're sitting there admiring somebody who's a complete useless moron. There's a very realistic possibility of that, okay? And a test for money, a good test for money to see if you're actually doing well with money, is to see if you make enough money while you're sleeping to cover all of your expenses for the day. And then think about it in terms of a longevity sense. That would be the next step, I think. Think about, do you have enough money? Do you have enough money coming from your money? Do you have enough money being made as a return for your money, not the money that you work for? You don't want to be in a situation where you're completely reliant on the money that you work for. Money that you work for is not going to do anything long term. It's the most heavily taxed. It's the most ridiculous way of making money. Think about it in terms of a longevity sense. Do you have enough of a return from your money to produce enough money for you to live the rest of your life forever? And is it a stable return? Think about that too. Is it a stable asset, and is it producing a reasonably stable return, right? Beef cattle are probably going to be worth something until infinity, and I would reasonably anticipate that the price of beef is higher in 50 years than it is today. All right, and beef cattle are not ever going to zero forever. Okay, beef cattle are not going to go to zero. All right, and but that's the whole thing about beef cattle. My whole take on the beef industry, right? Beef and gold are in the same segment of the economy. An animal that weighs 200 pounds will be worth at a monetary lower value than an 800-pound animal. All right, gold and 1 gram of gold will be worth monetarily less than a kilogram of gold. All right, and so that's the whole thing, okay? But I don't worry about money. There's a very realistic possibility that I end up with there's a very realistic possibility that I end up with 30% leverage, $50,000 liquid sitting in the bank, another $150,000 worth of cattle, and there's a very realistic situation. There's a very realistic possibility that I end up in that situation within 3 months. I got $150,000 worth of cattle, $50,000 liquid in the bank, and I'm only 30% leveraged. And at that point, the 50 grand, I mean, I could hold on to that 50 grand, take a loan for 50 grand and just add more debt to the portfolio. But if I add debt to the portfolio, if instead of investing my 50 grand, but the big benefit of me investing my 50 grand would be that if I invested my 50 grand and I took a loan for another 50 grand, I would actually be investing 100 grand, right? I would be investing 100 grand. And so that would give me a larger opportunity to grow my business. And that would actually increase the size of pool number 2 faster, right? The whole thing about if I invest 50 grand, let's say instead of 50 grand, let's talk about it in terms of 40 cattle. If I invest 40 cattle, those 40 cattle, granted that I do my part and the cattle do okay, etc., those 40 cattle will produce me about $8,000 a month of extra money. And that extra money will be happening every single month. The first month it'll be 8,000. The next month they will make me another 8,000. The next month they will make me another 8,000. But that money will not materialize itself as a check in my hand for 7 months. But that money is still there, right? And so I would realistically be looking to leverage against pool number 2 as well. But if I go, instead of investing $50,000 of a loan that I took from the bank, I take my 50 grand and I invest that money, and then I leverage against it, and my balance sheet is still, sitting, my balance sheet is sitting on like a 33% leverage. I would leverage against the whole thing, and, realistically, if I put the $50,000 in there, I would have to take a loan for, to take my balance sheet to an 80% leverage. I would have to take a loan for like 150 grand. And if I took a loan for 150 grand, then that would increase the size of pool number 2 3 times over, right? To 24,000 a month instead of 8,000. So, that's the big, in realistic, in a realistic situation, I would prefer to dump all of my money into my cattle. I would prefer to do that. But this is also what I'm talking about, if I have to dump $200,000 into my cattle in a month, that's going to take some serious elbow grease. And that's effectively the situation that I would reasonably anticipate that I end up with about 100 cattle within 3 months. And those 100 cattle will be, let me think about it. Those 100 cattle would be about if I take a look at the net positive evaluation, if I take a look at the unrealized gain, those 100 cattle will be somewhere about 35% leveraged. All right, because the 100 cattle would have gone up in value. And if I have 100 cattle, I'd be selling about 15 a month. Right now, I'm selling about 5. I will position myself to sell 5 every month. But, if I cannot precondition more, that's the thing I was going to talk about. The last thing I was going to talk about, the whole thing about it is, I don't want to be sitting on cash. I will ultimately end up in a situation where I'm sitting on cash and there's nothing I can really do about it, unless I'm looking to do something like invest $200,000 a month into my business and compound that upwards, okay? But very realistically, within 3 months, I will end up in a situation where I have about 100 cattle, and when I take a look at the net evaluation of those cattle and determine the monetary value, I will be about 30% leveraged. I will be about 35% leveraged with about 100 cattle. And so, the 40, and just to put things in perspective, the $45,000 that I have in debt right now, I could pay that all off with 1 month worth of money, with selling 15 cattle out of my 100 cattle. All right, 15 of those cattle would pay for the entire sum. All right, more, if the 40,000 that I have in debt right now, the cattle, 1 month worth of cattle, the 15 cattle would pay for the entire sum of my debt. So I could legitimately take my debt to 0. All right, and so I could legitimately take my debt to 0. All right, I may have 0 leverage. All right, but I don't exactly know what's gonna happen. But I would reasonably anticipate that I end up with about 100 cattle with about 35% leverage in the next 3 months. And when that happens, I would be making about $50,000 a month as a check in my hand, $40,000 a month as a check in my hand. And if I dumped that money, $40,000 back into pool number one, that would take my leverage down to like from 35% to like 15, 20%. And so realistically, to keep my leverage at 80%, I would have to invest like $200,000 in a month, and my numbers are compounding upwards. All right, and so that is the situation. Even right now, when I take a look at it, if I sell 5 cattle a month, I'll be making myself about somewhere around $14,000. And if I sell 5 cattle, I still have 30 cattle at home. Those 30 cattle are still making me money. There's a net positive gain on those herds, on those animals. If I sold all those animals, I would still have money left over, even though I paid the bank back all their money. All right. And that money is mine too. It may not be a check in my hand, but that money is all mine too. All right. And so, but there's no reason for me to the big idea is I will liquidate enough animals to have enough money to do what I need to do to keep my preconditioning pens full. But if my preconditioning pens are completely full and I cannot add any more animals, then I might as well just hold on to the animals that I have. And even if they end up at 1,400 pounds, I can technically just sell fed cattle at the sale barn. Okay, technically I can. I understand that people don't do it, but it's a lot of people don't do it, but it's a free country, and if that's what I decided to do, then I can do it. All right, if I decide to sell big old 1,000, 1,100 pound cattle, 1,200, 1,400 pound cattle, if it comes down to it, I can do that. I understand that a lot of people don't do it. People don't do it nowadays, but I can if I felt like it. Okay, it's a free country. But that's effectively the situation that I'm in. It's already becoming difficult for me to reinvest all the money that I make. I realistically anticipate that I will end up with about 100 cattle within 3 months at a 35% leverage. And when that happens, that would mean I would be making about $40,000 a month as a check in my hand. And if I dumped that money back into pool number one, that would drop my leverage down to about 15, 20%. And then I would realistically have to take a loan for like 150 grand, 200 grand to take my balance sheet back up to 80% leverage. And I don't have any place to precondition that many cattle. All right, this is something that I am working on right now. I will start clearing out the fields next month to prepare myself for the expansion. I will start working on clearing out the fields, and I will probably have to make myself a second preconditioning area, a larger second preconditioning area. I may even just buy myself a big piece of land and put a house on it and then just precondition cattle there.